going to walk down memory lane and we're going to talk about a couple of things, what happened in this town. Matter of fact, on that particular light pole right there, right almost where my wife's car is parked, my dad walked out of that bank right there. First Union Bank. All he wanted to borrow was $500. I was in the car with my mom. He cried like a little baby boy because you know what? He had impeccable credit, but he was black. True story. A lot of blacks didn't make waves about this thing because most of the folks in that town was working for somebody in the town, down there in the Osmond section. They figured they had the family to raise, so they went along with the program. Sometimes things happen to you for a reason, and trust me, I made the best of it. Right here, I got slapped in the back of the head, drank from this white water fountain. But she paid for that. That was my godmother. She took me and she said, don't ever drink from anything down here until I tell you to till you ask me. There was the white water fountain here, and right across that wall over there was the black water fountain. But she paid for it, because every time I came downtown, she had to walk me over to the Central Meat Market and buy me a knee-high soda. And my favorite was banana. So she paid for it. God rest her soul. Where that window was, blacks wasn't allowed to go inside. They got their medicine either from the door, from the window, or that's it. Can't make this stuff up, folks.
Couldn't go inside.
Couldn't go inside. They can go inside the central market and get their groceries, but couldn't go inside the pharmaceutical stores. If you wanted something, you got to tell them what they wanted. They brought it to the window. There were good merchants downtown. Let's not overlook them. One of them was Fountain Department Store. Great. Can't say enough about Nick Fountain and his family. They were great people, stand-up people. You know my father always said, you know when you're around great people, when they're willing to stand for something, when it means the most, and it's going to, there may be a little backlash, but you don't mind paying the price. Mr. Fountain was one of them, one of those people. He wasn't black, he was a white guy, but he was a true stand-up ally to the people in the community down there. When blacks had to go see a movie, they had to go to, on Rosemary, the Florida Theater. In West Palm Beach. And it's no longer there now, but they can't even go to the one on Clematis Street. The truth be told, there was a theater on Clematis Street. They couldn't go to that one. They had to go to the one on Rosemary. That were all the blacks, where they came from, Belglade, Boca Raton, Revere, or whatever. There, we had to go see the movies. You know, funny thing, when you start losing business, they want to say, come on in. You know, we want you. But that's in the late 70s by now. You understand? You can't go back and repaint this picture. Like if you go to Dr. Simon, one of my favorite guys, who took over Dr. Wolfden's office on First Avenue, who treat the women over there. Go to that back door. That was the back door for blacks. Can't make it up. Over here, was one of our mayor, right in Ramona Daddy, had the door on the east side for blacks. Can't make it up.
This particular mural was painted by Eduardo Cobra, who is a very well-known Brazilian visual artist. He is extremely prolific. He has painted 3,000 murals on 5 continents, and he's still going strong. And he's a completely self-taught artist. He never had any instruction. He grew up in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and he was constantly drawing on walls as a child. And as a matter of fact, he got arrested several times for defacing walls. And he went on to become a world-famous muralist. And this particular subject is very appropriate for him because he's always drawn to social justice issues. His most famous mural is one that's in the city of Brasilia. And of course, the city, when the city was built, it really revitalized the economy of the country, and all the politicians wanted to take credit for it. However, Eduardo Cobra immortalized the laborers who actually built the city and lived in terrible conditions over many years to create a gorgeous, modern city. So this subject matter is perfect for him. And I believe that you can see in this mural his greatest influence was the Mexican muralist Diego Rivera. And you can see that influence in the monumental size and the realistic style, the beautiful colors. And I believe that this is the largest of all of our Lake Worth Beach murals by Eduardo Cobra.
Okay, so here we are on South L Street in Lake Worth. This house happens to be 315. Looks like an ordinary front yard. But I want you to imagine the days when Fanny and Samuel James were here, when they homesteaded here, before the town of Lake Worth was platted and all the streets and the houses were here. This was woodland. It was scrub palmetto, some pine trees, crabapple trees, and that kind of thing. Very dense in places and hard to get through. But their first homestead was on the water, where we're going to end up, again, out of chronological order, but we're going to end up over there at the first homestead, where the post office was opened in 1889 and the mail delivery was by boat. Then in 1896, the railroad came in, the FEC railroad came in and ran down to Miami. It came to West Palm in 94, Miami in 96, and we're telling the history of your house. Come over. Yeah, Black History Tour. You know about the history of the burial there, right? This burial? Oh, yeah. Come on over. Come on over. Come on over. Okay. Maybe you can hear me from across there. The previous owners knew the story, but anyway. So this was the James's second homestead. We believe that the house there was a house on South K Street, and this was like in their backyard. So Samuel, Fanny's husband, died in 1909. He was about 15 years older. He lived to about 75, so pretty good age for those days. And he was buried here behind the house. And they had a little money, as we said. They had sold real estate and were, reasonably well-to-do. And so she built a nice memorial for him. There was a wrought iron gate around the site with some kind of stone marker. We don't know if it was a headstone or a flat stone, but some kind of marker for her husband there. And then when she sold the land the next year to Palm Beach Farms Company, she did not want to sell her husband's gravesite. So she carved out a 10 by 10 plat that was never sold to the city of Lake Worth and still belongs to the heirs of the James family in the middle of that lawn, okay? So then eventually the town was platted out. They put in the streets, and there's a little diagram here on the third page that shows the exact dimensions. You notice that this little square is the 10 by 10 plat. That was the homestead, and they didn't have the streets to line it up with, so it's a little bit off center, off cue. But when they surveyed it, that this did not belong to Lake Worth, you can see the exact measurements down to 1/10 of a foot, to inches, where that 10 by 10 plat is. And if you look on your survey, you'll probably see that 10 by 10 square still on the plat where Samuel James was buried. He was one of the original founders, an African-American man who was one of the first settlers here in Lake Worth. So then we're imagining, we don't know, the house was here in 1924, and we're imagining that the grave was still there and that the curved sidewalk was built around that fence. And people were asking, how can the city get control of it? There was a petition made to the county court. Nothing ever happened with that. And then sometime in the middle of the night, some men came. There was a neighbor who saw the men come with lanterns and shovels and dug up the fence and the stone, whatever was there, and threw them in the intercoastal, supposedly somewhere between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. So when this story started to come out, it was Scott McCabe, the reporter at the Post in '99, who was doing the investigation on this. And Helen Green, who's a well-known historian in town, says she heard that everything was, the fence was dumped between 2nd and 3rd Avenue in the intercoastal, and there was talk about diving and trying to find, there was talk about putting up a memorial here and different things, and nothing really came of it. They decided not to try to move the body if it was still there. In all likelihood, it was exhumed in the late 20s when the fence was removed. And after I wrote my book, Pioneers of Jewel, I haven't pitched that at all. But if you want to know more about all this, you know, you can read in the book. But the city decided to do a survey with ground penetrating radar to look for any remains that might be there. It's likely that his wife, Fanny, she died in 1915, believe it or not, in a car accident on Dixie Highway. She was driving a horse and buggy and was hit by a car in 1915. And in all likelihood, she was buried beside him, but the record is kind of mixed on that. That's one of the things that we hope to do, is to put some kind of a memorial to the James household here that would also be playground equipment. Oh, Tracy's here, yay! She's the artist. We're gonna look at her work in just a little bit, and she lives right here. So anyway, you know, it might be something as simple as pilings that kids could walk around up and down on or something, with some kind of a marker to indicate that this was the site of the first post office.
Can I just add a little more history?
Please.
Which is, after the Jameses moved away, all this land along the waterfront kind of reverted to, you know, the same kind of landscape and the rest of Florida. And when the company that developed Lake Worth in 1910 came in, they dedicated all this land along the waterfront as a public park, and they began to do landscaping, and this was in 1912, 1913, and then the next year, in 1914, after the city had been incorporated, they passed a bond issue to create the seawall that Ted was talking about, backfilled with sand to make a hard edge to the park. So that was like 1914, and they also had a dock. The city had a dock that went out like 1,000 feet.
There was a ferry to the beach that ran from the dock before the bridge was built. Right. So we talked about Amanda Moore before. So she owned this lot where the birthday cake castle is. Jameses were here. She was right there. And as we said, all the other properties were subdivided into 10 and 20 acres, but that was a 300 by 50 foot lot. So that was definitely a residential lot that Amanda Moore owned. And when Fanny James sold her land, she exempted that 10 by 10 square that was Samuel's burial and this home site. The reason being it was an all-white town, so Fanny had to move out of town. But she didn't want her friend to have to move out of town. So she didn't sell that property, and this was originally, 5th Avenue was originally the city limit. And then it meandered down through various steps to 12th Avenue. By the time you get to Dixie, whatever, that 12th was the border over there. And then this became Addition 1, didn't come into the city until like 5 years later.
In 1885, an African-American couple, Samuel and Fanny James, were two of the first people to file a claim for a homestead in the area. Two white neighbors served as witnesses for the 187-acre purchase, an indication that Samuel and Fanny were widely respected in the entire community. Samuel, a carpenter, built the couple's first home. In 1889, Fanny applied to designate their store as a post office and listed the name of the community as Jewel. Fanny served as postmaster and received mail deliveries by boat.